Okay, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Today is Monday. Happy Monday. Welcome to the Astro-Babble, where we are going to take 5 charts donated by you, my lovely followers, and we are going to read them live. This is what we do every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10:30 a.m. Astro weather permitting. And yeah, if you have charts that you would like to submit for the live stream, you can always private message me birth dates, places, and times of yourself, your friends, your family, people you always have consent from. That is very important in astrology. And yeah, I take dogs that have an accurate birth time, which is difficult because you need often to have an animal from a breeder or somebody who's there at the time of birth to capture that, because very rarely are they traveling with those records in adoption agencies. Anyways, yeah, so if you would also like to learn astrology or schedule a private one-on-one consult with me, you can always do so through my website, scorpiorisingastrology.com. And all previous live streams have been recorded, and they are also on the YouTube channel. Just search the website, scorpiorisingastrology.com. It should come right up. And yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and let's make our way to the charts. Our first chart belongs to Natasha. Natasha, my dear, how are you? Cheers, good morning. Ooh, nice little Capricorn stellium in the first house. So we have Natasha with Capricorn ascendant, very, very close to Uranus in Capricorn retrograde, Neptune in Capricorn retrograde, Saturn in Capricorn retrograde. Now, there are a couple things when I see this that I need to kind of touch on, but then also anybody who's watching astrology right now knows that Capricorn is getting hit very, very hard. That will soon be lessening as of Wednesday. So we need to kind of talk about current astro weather as well as the baseline meaning of these aspects. So to have a Capricorn stellium in the first house, including the lord of your chart, Capricorn, although he is retrograde, there is this very deep, very dense, very earthy energy that takes over the chart, even though, oh, well, girl, Taurus sun so close to Venus in Taurus, like all the earth. I'm not like all the earth. Why not just take all of it? Why not just put all of the earth signs in your prominent placements? You know? And then you've got this really sensitive moon in Pisces who's just trying to function. So we've got Capricorn who's taking over a majority of the chart. And this Capricorn energy makes you a very strong leader. It also makes you rather introverted. It makes you very good with saying no to things. The idea of editing is one of Capricorn's favorite topics. Capricorn's in it for the long game, though. Like if you try to lie to a Capricorn, if you try to blow smoke with a Capricorn, if you try to talk about visions for the future with a Capricorn, like they're a little bit too grounded for all of that nonsense. And I think that that's really what your chart is saying, is especially with all these retrogrades, these planets at their slowest surrounding your ascendant, like you're very much embodying that tortoise aspect of Capricorn, that slow and steady wins the race energy that's coming right up forward. However, like I said, anybody who's watching the skies right now astrologically knows that Capricorn has been experiencing some pretty harsh transits with Jupiter, who was retrograde, Saturn, who just stationed this morning and will officially station direct on Wednesday. But then also retrograde Pluto is still present. There's a lot of nonsense that's happening, especially with the Sun about to square, Mars about to square from Aries. There's lots of stuff happening. And the reason why I bring up these transits is because your first house is the house of the self and the body. And that's universal in all charts. The first house is the house of identity, but it's also very important in medical astrology, which is something that I focus on very heavily. And to have such intense transits coming forward in the first house for you now, this is a very strong identity crisis time for you. This is a very strong physical awakening and opening for you, and it's going to be felt very, very much in the bones, in the joints. That Capricorn rules. Strictly Capricorn rules the knees, but I really like to extend that to all major joints as well as the teeth. Yeah. Because those are bones too. Everybody forgets about the teeth, and that's just something to be aware of. This is also a really, really difficult financial time for you right now, but will be better as Saturn releases, and especially as Jupiter and Saturn conjoin on December 19th. In Aquarius, your financial house. So big financial moves coming down the surface, but now you're just planting seeds. There's a lot of still self-development, still self-growth, although we're at the edge of it. So let's move over to this kind of double punch of Sun and Venus in Taurus. Just absolutely glorious placements. I love to see this, not just because Venus is ruling the Sun, but because you have Capricorn on the ascendant. That means that Venus and the Sun are in your 5th house of children, parenting, creativity, sexuality. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful place to have your Sun and your Venus. This strongly identifies you with the role of the parent. It strongly endears you to, excuse me, strongly endears you to children. It's just a lovely placement. That Earth goddess energy of Venus and Taurus works so well in the 5th house, and I just love seeing that placement being so strong and so benefic in your chart. However, we do have some struggles going on, some struggles. There is this really very artsy side to you. We do have the moon in Pisces as well as North Node in Pisces in the 3rd house of writing, teaching, communication. You becoming a teacher, you becoming an artist, especially of the spoken or the written word. That poetry aspect, I think, very, very important for your long-term growth and your emotional fulfillment. However, that conflicts with what you do for a living, where you have a very strongly placed Mercury in Gemini, co-present with Jupiter in Gemini in the 6th house of work. Now, this is excellent, really. It's a very strong Mercury placement, and we love a strong Mercury placement, especially when it comes to work. Yeah, it means that in the workplace, your mind is very sharp, your intellect is very on. You're often thrown into communicative roles. You know, lots of really dynamic stuff happening with that Mercury in Gemini so prominently placed in a career house. But that naturally conflicts with your passion, your desire to learn, your desire to expand and grow. And this is something that I'll often coach clients on, is like, look, not everybody gets to earn money from what they're passionate about, right? It's not always a thing. Does that mean you give up on it? No. You find a way to pay the bills, and then you go do what you want on the side. It's called moonlighting, yeah? And so what if all you do is, you know, spend money on supplies for your enjoyment? It's what you enjoy, right? But it will be very, very important to your life purpose, this artistic expression, because of the North Node being in that 3rd house. So I would highly encourage you to unlock your writing, teaching, communication skills, apply those towards a more kind of poetry-centric or written word-centric aspect, and dig deep into those skill sets, because those will favor you down the road. Now, we do have some relationship stuff that's coming forward as well. We have a Mars in Cancer in the 7th, which is an exceedingly frustrating placement in a spouse, and the frustration comes like this. Mars is the planet of will, desire, and action, right? He wants to move forward. He wants to command and conquer. That's his job as the warrior. However, Mars in Cancer, the sign of the mother, the sign of the caretaker, right, does not necessarily jive with that warrior energy. One wants to go into battle and take off heads. One wants to be the nurse that's, you know, taking care of the trail of bodies behind the warrior. It's a very different archetype. And to have that in the 7th house of relationships, there's some conflicting energy there. Spouses that you'll attract will often present as the bad boy, or the bad girl, or the bad person. But then they'll have this really soft, gooey center that takes them over and diminishes their sense of will and action. Or you fall in love with the sensitive side, and then you find that there's a lot of repressed anger or kind of masculine, young tendencies that need to be exercised. which are in direct conflict to the sensitive nature. So we need to be aware that when it comes to relationships, there may be some polarity balancing. Like you have a very strong Venus, but a very detrimental Mars. Your yang is out of balance. And so you attract people into your life who are also yang, out of balance, or who may be hyper young, that hyper aggressive tendency. So we need to just be aware of that dynamic and honor that dynamic, potentially do some Mars remediation in the chart. Because although there's a lot of earth and water in the chart, I really, really enjoy it. The one thing that you're missing in this chart is fire. We need to reconnect with that element pretty strongly, and get some combustion, get some heat, get some movement, get some proper light and inspiration back into the depths of the chart. Side note, Venus is ruling the 10th house of career success from the 5th house of children, so famous children, definitely something to look out for. Children who surpass you in success and notoriety. And then, yeah, it just kind of goes back to the idea of current transits being nonsense for you, especially on a physical level, but also on a personal level. And as December 19th rolls around, which is the magic date that everybody is waiting for this pressure to be released, we will finally have Jupiter, the planet of abundance, out of his detriment in Capricorn. It will also free up a lot of your relationship stuff, make that easier to handle, and be a great boon for finances as well. Okay. Thank you, Natasha, for donating your chart to science. So glad that you enjoyed it. Let's pull up our next chart. Our next chart is going to be Jay. Good morning, Jay. Cheers. How are you? Oh. Fascinating. Jay, what are we going to do with you? What are we going to do with you? A darker journey you've signed up for this go around. Darker journey. Strategic. You've given yourself the weapons that you need in order to command these trials, but yeah, I can see you've strategically softened the edges in certain places and planted weapons around for you to fight the monsters, but that doesn't change the fact that you've signed up to fight monsters this go around. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about your ascendant. So Aquarius ascendant naturally means that you have a touch of the quirky. Aquarius ascendant is that fixed air energy. It's known for its speedy intellect, its genius ideas, but also for being a little bit otherworldly, kind of above it all, rather aloof, but aloof in an intellectual way. Your sun is also an Aquarius, so you are what's known as a double Aquarius, and you are a triple air sign because your moon is also in Libra, which I think is a lovely lightness that you bring to the chart, first and foremost, before we get into the heavier, earthy, waterier topics, for sure. That air is something that I very much appreciate. Your moon and your ascendant are also just a couple degrees away from a grand trine of air with the North Node in Gemini in the 5th. Like your desire to awaken the 5th house of parenting, creativity, sexuality, and children. It's very much going to be a theme throughout the life, but there's a dark road ahead to unlock that North Node. But having that Aquarius energy, Aquarius is the sign of the rebel. It's a sign that really does well in adversity because it can be creative, resourceful, very MacGyverish. And then you also have Moon in Libra. Moon in Libra gives you that peacekeeping energy, just a dash of it into the emotional space. Libra Moon is also very compassionate, very loving, very caring, very tender, but also active and a little bit emotionally indecisive, but if you make too quick of a decision, you've learned that hurts you in the past, and that's an important kind of distinction to make. Okay, so now we need to get into the rough stuff. So the Lord of your chart is this Saturn in Scorpio in the 10th of success. We also have Mars in Scorpio as well as Pluto in Scorpio. So we have the the primary and the secondary ruler of Scorpio being Mars and Pluto in Scorpio, ruling the ruler of your chart, Saturn in Scorpio. When we look at the ruler of the chart being in the 10th, this automatically means that you will be thrown into the spotlight. You will be somewhat addicted to fame. The idea of you constantly being the center of attention is something that your chart both loves and hates. And it's an interesting dynamic for sure, because that's where your power is, in the spotlight. You have a very commanding presence. You have a very trusting presence as well. People love to hear your ideas, but Scorpio is a sign that prefers not to be noticed. Scorpio is a sign that prefers to be in the shadows. Scorpio is a sign that prefers to stay out of it. And unfortunately, you don't necessarily get that choice, my darling. You have been selected to take part in this year's annual Hunger Games. And that's very much kind of the energy of the 10th house is, you know, you get this fame, but it's a darker kind of fame. It's a more seductive kind of fame because of Scorpio. It's a more kind of gothic sort of fame. It's a fame of things and people and places that are underworld in nature, that people don't necessarily like to share or talk about. It's a little bit more mysterious, a little bit more avant-garde. But there is power in that. There is strength in that. You know, you have gone out of your way to place the Lord of Scorpio in the house, as well as secondary ruler of Scorpio in the house. There's power there. There's strength there, which I really enjoy. However, we need to also respect that this is a nuanced type of strength. This is not the typical 10th house kind of Leo aspect where you're parading around in glitzy glam costumes and doing these extravagant feats of showmanship. You know, this is you holding back power in order to gain attention, and to be mysterious and to play a little bit of cloak and dagger with the fame monster. Okay. Now we get to move into unlocking your 12th house, which is where we have some interesting placements as well. So we have Neptune here, Jupiter here, and Mercury here. Mercury, we'll start with, rules the mind. And when we look at your Mercury being in Capricorn, I do not like Mercury being in Capricorn because it's a rather stubborn mind. Mercury in Capricorn locks down the opportunity that Mercury, as the ruler of Gemini, the air sign, and Virgo, the analytical earth sign, who is also mutable, prefers to consider options. And Capricorn is no, it is right or wrong. There is no option here, which is why I like your Libra moon, who considers options, coming to the rescue. But your Mercury in Capricorn prefers you to be stubborn mentally. And unfortunately, when it's in the 12th house like this, it can mean a mind that is a little bit more prone to mental dis-ease, a mind that is prone to think itself into its own problems. So we need to be aware of that. Some self-help might be needed, some professional or personal development might be needed, a lot of kind of mind books, how the mind works. That would be very, very influential for you to gain that skill, because it's one thing to have emotional strength and it's one thing to have an overall intellectual curiosity, but to understand how the mind works and to understand how your mind works specifically would be very, very helpful to counterbalance this not so great Mercury. If the mind does start to get to you, I would highly suggest some Mercury remediation and honoring that planetary force, because that Mercury is also ruling your 5th house, your North Node. So if you are looking to investigate the world of having children, Mercury would also need to be very strong. He is not very strong in your chart. So awakening that astrological force, we can always kind of teach you how to do that one-on-one if you were interested. But then we also have Jupiter here. Jupiter is in his fall at 0 degrees of Capricorn, also can join Neptune in Capricorn, just to add to the confusion. And I'm not sure whether that adds to the confusion or softens the blow. However, regardless of if it's helpful or hurtful, the idea of Jupiter in Capricorn, period, as the planet of prosperity in the sign of his detriment, who rules your financial house? via Pisces is not a great look on anybody. We need to be very aware that you are prone to throwing your money away due to self-improvement, the need for advanced medical care, the need for kind of retreats, sabbaticals, because you do not take care of yourself for a certain amount of time on a ritualistic level, which is really what that Capricorn energy wants you to do. You then start to fall apart and need to seek medical care via the 12th house of hospitalizations, and that can be tricky. So we need to make sure that that Jupiter is remediated as well, and also that you don't touch your own money. The more you can get somebody else to look after your own finances, or partner with a strong financial professional to make sure that your finances are ordered, your taxes are paid, and that they are paid at the lowest amounts possible. Like, don't do financial things yourself, because frankly, your money placements are just not very strong, and we need strong money placements in order to do those kinds of things. Then we start to kind of resurface again with some of the lighter stuff. The 11th house of friendships has Venus, Our Lady Venus, so good, so nice, who is ruling the moon in Libra, so I like that. I like that kind of partial synergy there. We have the South Node here, Uranus here, MC here. There's a strong pull for friendships, but again, friendships aren't necessarily going to be all that helpful because we have Jupiter in detriment, who is ruling that house via Sagittarius. So Venus is here to make it a little bit nicer, a little bit more favorable, but she doesn't really offset that poor Jupiter placement. Plus we have Uranus, the planet of unpredictability here, and the South Node, indicating that, you know, although friends can be fun, they can certainly shake things up. Like, sure, why not? But is it the most healthy energy? I would disagree. Instead, I would rely on spouse. I would rely on potential children. I would rely on more stable relationships that can help you identify your patterns, that can help you feel a little bit more grounded, and help you feel like you're more on track with your life's purpose, instead of the kind of occasional acquaintance who sucks up time, sucks up energy, sucks up mental space, when you really need somebody who's a little bit more consistent in your life. Wow, okay. And just like that, chart goes cold. Cool. So thank you, Jay. I appreciate you donating your charts. Thank you very, very much. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll move on to our third chart. Our third chart is going to be Laura. Good morning, Laura. How are you? We're going to switch to water instead of coffee. Laura's got a Virgo ascendant. Oh, damn. Oh, damn. And this is what I mean when I say, you know, the charts kind of synchronize, because Laura actually has the same Mercury in Capricorn, and I'm kind of going to say the exact same thing, like Mercury in Capricorn, not super great with the mind. Makes somebody notoriously stubborn. But also really interesting parallels between this chart and the last chart, because we have Virgo ascendant, and that Virgo ascendant is in the 5th house of children, making children and parenting a very big part of the life, but also creativity, sexuality, the metaphysical and the physical act of creation, very important. We also have the sun here, super identifying with that house, and Neptune, just for giggles. But the concept here is that there is a hardness, there is a denseness, there is a strictness to the 5th house. You know, this could manifest as supreme order. And when I say supreme order, I mean it in the fiercest way. Like Capricorn energy at this level, mentally and in some cases emotionally. Yeah, the moon is also in Taurus and Earth sign. Like the fixedness, the rigidness of this chart is very strong, very, very earthy. Yeah, so earthy, so deep, so dense. But it's all really centering around that 5th house of children. Um, and why do we need that restriction? Why do we need that denseness? Why do we need that order? It's because there's a lot of fourth house stuff that's happening. So the ninth house is the house of travel, the fourth house is the house of family, and we have Venus down here in the fourth house in Sagittarius, as well as Saturn and Uranus. And then Venus is ruling the moon in Taurus up in the ninth of travel, foreigners, higher education, spirituality. You know, there is a simultaneous need to be free, but also to be grounded. Wouldn't surprise me if parents or family had extensive travel backgrounds, or sometimes I see like military families being associated with the ninth house, or just families that had to move around a lot, that being a big thing. So when you know everything around you is changing, how do you compensate for that? You compensate with rules and regulations. Yeah, and that's kind of part of the dynamic here in this chart. We have such heavy placements, but those heavy placements are trying to counterbalance the hypermobility in the chart. And then we have an exalted Jupiter in the 7th and Mars and Aries in the 8th. Wow, that's been a really interesting Mars transit in the 8th house for you. Wouldn't surprise me if there was a death back when Mars went into Aries, way back when during the summer. But anyway, so we have Jupiter in Pisces. Jupiter in Pisces in the 7th house is absolutely glorious. I mean, it's the most prosperous planet in the chart, in his home sign of Pisces, in the 7th house of relationships. You know, being attracted to the hyper spiritual aspect of somebody is something that I'll see a lot with this placement. You're really attracted to kind of the gushy, whimsical, artsy Dionysus type figure of that Jupiter in Pisces. You're also attracted to somebody who, despite that kind of flighty tendency, that hypermutable tendency of Pisces, really wants to start a family. So if they don't want kids, if they don't want to necessarily nest with you, then that's gonna be a little bit of a deal breaker, for sure. Yeah, we're going to have to address this Mars in Aries and this North Node in Aries in the 8th house. Strong entrepreneurial drive paired with that 5th house of creativity. I like it. I actually really like it because it does bring forward a lot of good business type acumen. But in what way, I ask? But in what way? And that Mars is making a loose trine to Venus down in the 4th, so a home-based business would be very prosperous. A home-based business, especially that attaches itself to an international audience, because Venus is co-ruling the 2nd house of finance and the 9th house of travel, foreign, and spiritual endeavors via the 4th house of family and home. Yep. I would definitely like to see a home-based business that reaches an international clientele, potentially in the spiritual space, in order to make additional cash flow. No, for some reason the chart's being really fussy with me. I'm not really getting a lot of other hits other than that. So the chart is repressing itself, and that's something that I'll see sometimes in these lives where I'm looking at the chart, and for some reason the chart's like, no, I don't want to give up the goods. The goods are there, but the goods will not be given. We haven't scraped the bottom of this chart by any means, Laura, so I apologize for needing to do this, but the chart just doesn't want to be read any further. So thank you so much for donating your chart. I hope that you enjoyed the conversation that we had thus far. Perfect. Love you, Laura. That's lovely. I'm so glad that you've enjoyed the read. Okay. And yes, there are a couple people who are kind of jumping on. Um, if you would like to join the live streams and have your chart be on the list is rather long, so please be patient. But you can always submit your birth date, birthplace, exact birth time to me via private message, and that will get you on the list. However, if you would prefer to be a little bit more one-on-one, a little bit more private, a little bit more formal, where I actually take time to look at your chart and answer your questions one-on-one, you can always schedule a private session with me via my website at scorpiorisingastrology.com. That's my website. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's move on to chart number 4. Chart number 4 is going to be Honey. Miss Honey, cheers. How are you? Another Aquarius ascendant. Why not? Oh, with an exalted Saturn. Oh, I'm excited. Oh, with a fallen Mars. Okay, Venus, nice exalted moon in the 4th house. Cancer Sun, Mercury in Cancer, North Node Cancer, 6th house. Ooh. Oh, but then there's that Venus-Neptune opposition. Okay. Overall, I'm a fan, honey. So let's talk about this. So we've already talked about Aquarius ascendant earlier in the first chart. Brings that kind of quirky air energy to the surface. Even though you're technically a Cancer, we have to respect your sun and your moon sign, or your ascendant and your moon sign. They make the 3 pieces of you, and you actually have 3 very different pieces of you in this chart. So we have the sun in Cancer, which is where you get your empathy, which is where you get your wateriness. It often comes out in a work setting, that kind of caretaker, mothering energy. But then we also have the moon in Taurus, which gives you that fixed earth energy, that groundedness, that stability, that kind of rocky energy that people love to just huddle around and take comfort in. And then we have this rebel, this Aquarius energy who's constantly coming up with new ideas, who's getting lost in the clouds, who's somewhat aloof, but in an intelligent way. Aquarius is the sign of the genius, and we have to respect and remember that. But its genius is often lost on mere mortals like us. Okay. Now, having the lord of your chart being Saturn, because your chart is ruled by Aquarius, in the 9th house, and that Saturn being exalted through Libra is fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. I'm a huge fan. And the 9th house topics will be very, very prominent within your life. And those topics are going to be foreigners, travel, higher education, and spirituality. Those 4 topics are going to be very, very prevalent within your chart for always, forever and for always, because it's just who you are as a person that makes up those topics. However, we do have Mars in Libra who's rather detrimental. If you do find that you've lost your purpose, if you do find that you've lost your identity, or that you can't seem to pull the trigger, and your sense of action turns into indecisiveness, then I would do some Mars remediation, because that Mars is in a weak spot. I'm not really a fan of that weak Mars. However, everything else is fine in that department. Then we have this this moon in Taurus in the 4th. The nesting quality of this is so beautiful, because the 4th house is the house of family. And the moon in Taurus is the most kind of nesty combination that we can get. The moon is all about our emotions and our sensitivity level and where we find comfort internally. And Taurus is that fixed earth sign. It is the literal nest that comes forward. It is that rocky domain, but it is the soft grass of Taurus, the field that you can just kind of lay in and soak up the sky and the soil and the smell of life, really. A moon in Taurus delights in the sensual pleasures of everyday existence. Good food, good wine, good people, good music, good scents, good fabrics, being surrounded in nature, all these things. And to have that in the 4th house of home and family, it's just you making your home as sacred as possible. You often kind of seeking a second home in nature as well, and creating just the most sacred of spaces. I absolutely adore a good moon in Taurus. Uh, so that's that. Then we have your work life. Your work life is actually very fascinating. Um, for a couple different reasons. So we have Mercury in Cancer, which brings a very empathetic nature to the mind. It makes the mind a little bit more emotional, a little bit more caretaker centered, but it also makes you an excellent clinician. You'd be a great nurse, you'd be a great healthcare worker, you'd be a great counselor. Um, you'd be a great just assistant, especially in the healthcare field. Um, in any way, shape, or form, because you've got that Sun in Cancer, Mercury in Cancer in the sixth house. Like, you're constantly wondering, how can I take care of somebody? And that can be a very useful skill for you to kind of have in the workforce. And I really enjoy that for you, especially with the moon in Taurus. Like, you're very concerned about your own comfort and the comfort of others. And you can tap into whether or not somebody's comfortable often just by looking at them. And that skill alone is so valuable in the healthcare field, however you choose to exercise it. Also, I want you to know something about your financial stuffs, right? You have your second house ruled by Pisces, and your Jupiter is up in Scorpio in the 10th house of success, but it's the spotlight house. And one of the things that you're going to need to make peace with, if you have not already, is you being more out in front of people, places, and things in order to earn more money. So if you are offered a promotion, take it. Do not hesitate. Do not think that you could do better work where you are at now, because I guarantee you could not. Yeah. The impact that you will have will be greater, and the paycheck that you will have will be greater as well. The more you activate the 10th house of success, the more you step into the spotlight, the more money you will earn, and the more good you will do. It might be a different kind of good, that you may not necessarily, it's not going to be the same as being hands-on. Yeah, but you will be able to be hands-on in a very, very different way, which will be more rewarding and more fulfilling and better for your financial state. So just remember that the more public you are in your professional life, the more money you will gain, because you'll be tapping that Jupiter placement. But also because Jupiter is ruling your financial house, the current state of Jupiter right now, he just went direct a couple weeks ago, so there will be a lightening of the load financially, but he's still in detriment, and it's not really going to get better until December 19th, until the holidays. Okay, then we need to talk about this Venus-Neptune opposition, which I think is fascinating, because Venus in the fifth house is always a really great place for Venus, because it's the house of literal children and parenting, sexuality, creativity. Venus does all those things, especially in Gemini. Um, but then we have Neptune and Sagittarius in the 11th house, as well as Uranus and Sagittarius in the 11th house. Both are retrograde. Not great placements for them, honestly. Like you going out drinking with your friends, and you like spending time and having parties, and just being socially active and being a butterfly, like that will fulfill some of your 10th house energy requirements, but it's not the same. It's not the same. You having fun and going out for a night on the town and spending social time with friends does not scratch the itch that is needed in your chart. Instead, Venus is trying to pull you deeper down into the fifth house of creativity and children, to kind of get you closer to some of those professional goals, which your chart is really trying to get you to unlock. And once you unlock those professional goals and those personal goals, then you're going to start to feel a deeper sense of fulfillment that, unfortunately, your friendship houses won't necessarily be able to get you there, although they will be a nice stepping stone if you feel stuck in your career. Networking is also going to be a really great thing for you to do. Whether it's if you're struggling getting promoted at a certain job, and you're like, I really need to go on the job hunt, don't apply for online jobs. Don't apply for jobs online. Go to a networking event, because the social aspect of that Sagittarius house will be influenced by Jupiter in the 10th, your physical presence, the way that you carry yourself, how people see you, and that will sell you more than any online resume. So yeah. that's that. So yeah, recharge at home. Don't recharge socially. But if your professional life needs a boost, go out in public. Go out in public. Don't bury your ass in public, but go out in public. Okay. Good morning, good morning, good morning, everybody who's tuning in. Thank you so much for watching on Instagram and Facebook. We have one more chart that we are going to talk about, and we are not talking about Honey's chart. We're talking about Sarah's chart. Sarah's chart. Good morning, Sarah. How are you? Cheers. A Cancer stellium. Ooh. Ooh. Venus and Gemini carrying over from the last chart. How fun. Opposing the MC. North Node in Aries, co-present with the Lord of the chart. I love it. Being ruled by that stellium in the 5th house. Love it. Okay, so here's the deal, Sarah. We have a Pisces ascendant, which doubles down on the watery nature of your new moon in Cancer. So we need to talk about what it means to be a triple water sign. I know what it means to be a triple water sign more than most because I have Scorpio rising and I have the exact same formation that you do. My sun and my moon are conjoined. They're just a degree apart right after the new moon. So as a triple water sign, we are triply sensitive. We need to understand this. We need to understand this big time. We are not just mentally and emotionally sensitive, we are also physically sensitive as well. Hydration is going to be very important for you. We also need to respect that our emotions are not always our own. And it becomes difficult because a new moon in a chart naturally is somebody who tends to hide their emotions. And hiding their emotions is fine. Like, it's a defense mechanism. It's how people adopt and adapt and whatever. But when we are so sensitive and constantly picking up other people's stuff, and we are maybe rushing through our day, or we don't have the energy to process those feelings all the time, because they can often be overwhelming, or we just mistake somebody else's stuff for our stuff, yeah, and then we refuse to share it, or we compartmentalize it and we forget about it, then it starts to fester, my darling. And that's the danger of being a triple water sign with a new moon, is you often have to induce emotional vomiting. And I do that with Disney movies, which I enjoy very, very much. If I feel like I'm emotionally clogged, I'll throw on a good Disney movie. Gets me every time the water works. And so it's just about kind of coughing up the stuff that's repressed emotionally. And that's kind of just like keeping your rivers flowing. There's a nice segment in Avatar where he's talking about clearing the chakras and clearing the rivers, and it's a good scene. I would highly recommend you just go to YouTube and search Avatar chakra clearing. It's a good segment with the rivers, the river analogy. Anyway, so let's talk about the Lord of your chart, Jupiter. So Jupiter is ruling your chart. Jupiter is in the 2nd house of finance, and that means that your life is going to revolve around the ideas of physical wealth, but also the idea of your own wealth, your own self-esteem, those being very, very important topics to you. Now, the North Node is also here as well, so you're here to learn about wealth, and you've decided to surround yourself with it, which I like. It's a strategy. It's when I look at charts, you know, some charts are kind of all over the place, right? People kind of came in and they're like, I'm just going to experience everything, and I'm like, well, that's not really helpful. And then they ask, like, well, what am I supposed to do for the rest of my life? What job am I supposed to have? Who am I supposed to marry? I said, honey, you literally just told me that you're here to experience everything. Why are you trying to weigh yourself down with one job, one lover, one partner, one title? You know, it's counterintuitive. But here, you've stuck yourself into a pipeline, and I really, really enjoy that level of focus, especially with the water. The water needs to be guided, and you've really chosen to guide yourself very well with these placements. So finance, in the 2nd house, there's going to be, you do have Jupiter here. Jupiter is in Aries, so he's not really a strong Jupiter. Jupiter doesn't really like to be in Aries too much. He becomes a little bit too hot-headed when he's in Aries. But Jupiter is also very abundant and expansive, making money a little bit easier than most. The ruler of your second house of finances, however, is Mars in Cancer, who is in his fall. And that's not necessarily super great. So there will be some issues with the topics that we're about to breach in regards to finance. But finance in general is something that you're here to really, really focus on very heavily this go around. And again, because we're talking about Jupiter, and Jupiter just recently went direct from being retrograde, there is going to be some ease financially that has come up over the last couple weeks, some nice movement in that department, and it will continue to get easier, especially in the success department for you, because Jupiter is ruling that house December 19th when Jupiter and Saturn move into Aquarius. Okay. So now we need to go to this Cancer stellium. So we have Sun in Cancer, Moon in Cancer, Mercury in Cancer, Mercury in Cancer, who is retrograde, as well as Mars in Cancer in the 5th house of children. So putting your Moon and your Sun in the 5th house of children really identifies you with the children and parenting archetype. It also identifies you as a creative in general. Mercury here and Mars being here in not necessarily great spaces, not super big a fan of that. So Mercury being retrograde, Mercury is moving backwards in the cycle, super slow Mercury in the 5th house. Communicating with children might be a little bit difficult. Communicating as a parent might be a little bit difficult. Don't use words, use feelings. Yeah. Don't use words, use feelings. And that's something that I'd like you to remember. You know, words will often fail you when it comes to parenting. If you let your heart speak, if you let your eyes speak, if you let your body language speak, children will often respond to that quicker than any word you could ever say. Then we have Mars in Cancer. It's a really difficult space for Mars to be in, honestly, because Mars, although Mars is in a semi-mutual reception with Jupiter, Jupiter being exalted in Cancer and Mars ruling Aries, so there is nice synastry there, I would think. But there is a little bit of a problem because Mars is ruling the 2nd house of finance and he's in detriment from the 5th house. So I think that it's the child archetype of your chart, the parenting archetype of your chart that's so strong and so forward, might be a little bit financially taxing, and we need to be aware of finances in a way that, especially when it comes to parenting children, creativity, that we're not losing money because of such heavy emotional investments and interests. Like, can you afford the child? Can you afford that latest craft project? Just because it brings you emotional healing does not necessarily mean that that is the only way you can achieve that emotional healing. We might need to choose a less expensive hobby. Yeah. But you actually working with children, I think that would be an excellent career for you, because the Sun is ruling the 6th house of work from the 5th house of children. Da, 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 da. No, that's it? Okay, that's it? All right, Sarah, thank you. The chart has gone cold, but thank you for donating your chart. I very much appreciate it. And that is all we have time for today. We're at about 48 minutes, and I very much appreciate everybody who's jumping on. Thank you so much for donating your charts, for watching the live streams and supporting, telling your friends, your family who are interested in astrology about it. If you would like to donate charts to the live stream, again, the list is long, so please be patient, but I would be happy to add your name to the list. Feel free to private message me your birth date, place, and exact birth time. Do not post those on social media for privacy sakes. And if you would like to schedule a private consult or learn astrology, you can always go to my website, where I have a consultation request form and downloadable online classes on things like medical astrology, astrology basics, and that is my website, scorpiorisingastrology.com. So yeah, that's it. Thank you for joining me. We will be back here on Wednesday morning to go through this whole shebang again. Until next time, May the stars be ever in your favor.